Thank you so much. I want to thank Navmeet for nominating me, and I want to thank the selection committee for choosing me to participate. It's such an honor and a privilege to have this opportunity to speak with you tonight. There's so many great faculty on this campus who could be up on this stage tonight, and so I do recognize that I am just one of the many faculty who are working hard for our students, for our disciplines, and for our communities. So thank you again for the opportunity to be with you this evening. There's a saying in Spanish that I've learned from my Spanish-speaking students. Forgive my not perfect Spanish, but it's "Dime que quién andas y te diré que quién es." Tell me who your friends are, and I'll tell you who you are. And before I begin, I cannot start without recognizing the people in this room who have played significant roles in my life. And there are at least two mentors and another three community role models that I've looked to and seen. And so I want to pay special tribute and honor to both Dr. Stephen Rodemeyer, who was my chemistry professor when I was a freshman, sophomore year at Fresno State, and Dr. Francine Puta, who I consider a mentor of mine as well. And the three community role models are Michael O'Hare. Thank you for being here this evening. Your dedication and to service in our community is an example that I hold up not only for myself but also my students. And my two parents, Alan and Rosemary Gendian, are both role models to me for learning and education. And if you know some of my work at Fresno State, you know that I'm known for service and learning, and I get that from my parents. Service and learning. So thank you. And then, those aren't the only people that I've walked with, right? My colleagues. There's so many of my colleagues, and I wouldn't get all the names right. I would just like to ask, there's several from my department who are here, several from my college who are here, several from across different departments, because our work does span across colleges on this campus and buildings. And so I'd just like all my colleagues that I'm walking arm in arm with, doing that hard work, I would like you to stand to be recognized, because I don't do this work alone, and I want people to know that. Please stand. I'll call you out. Yes, Nora back there. Nora. Yes, thank you. Thank you. And then, I was so pleasantly surprised this evening when I saw former students and alumni who are either in graduate school or have already finished graduate school and doing some amazing work. So if you're a former student of mine, I'd like an alumni of Fresno State, I'd like those individuals to stand up. All right, thank you. Look at that. Oh my goodness. We got a little class reunion going on. And then if you're a current student and still working towards your degree, if you're a current student of mine, or done advising with me, I'd like you to stand, because you are the next generation of leaders in this community, and you're in the front row, some of you, so I will call you up if you don't stand. Please stand. Thank you. Awesome. The power of relational culture, right? Relationships are critical to our work. If we don't recognize the role that other people play in our lives, we won't realize the power that they bring to us, the energy, right, that they give to us. So thank you all for being here. The topic tonight is Forward Together, valuing differences and mobilizing similarities to achieve common goals. And as I'm speaking about this topic, this process of Forward Together really starts with knowledge and understanding of self, knowledge and understanding of others, and through empathy, hopefully, the building of a bridge to create an us. That's the process of Forward Together. I think that whole process then starts with identity. And while I could speak to you about George Herbert Mead's theory of self, the I and the me and the generalized other, or I could go into Erikson's 8 stages of identity formation, or I could give a lecture about Charles Horton Cooley's looking glass self and the idea that we derive our sense of who we are based on what we think other people think of us. Instead, I'm going to just cut straight to the chase. And that is ask the central question, who are you? Let's stay on that one for a second. You ever been asked this question? Who are you? And then you say, I'm Matthew Gendian. And they say, no, who are you? And you say, well, I'm Matthew Gendian. I'm a Fresno native of Armenian descent. I'm a proud father and spouse. I have two boys, right? I'm a professor at Fresno State. And they look at you and still ask, no, who are you? It starts with those identities and roles that we play, but identity goes much deeper than that. Who am I? Why am I here? Why do I do the work that I do? Why do you do what you do? What do you aspire to, and how are you working towards that goal? What are you doing towards what you aspire to be? And then ultimately, who are we? Who are we? So, we end up with those central questions around identity. And so, while our identity does start with these various forms, it's not where it ends. There are dimensions of diversity. And these dimensions of diversity, I'm going to actually ask you about. And so if you have a mobile device, I'm going to ask that you pull out your phones. I know that's a violation of a class rule, but you get to do that. So go ahead and pull out your mobile device, and you're going to text Dr. Gendian. Doesn't matter if it's caps or lowercase or one cap and the rest lower. Dr. Gendian to 37607. Text Dr. Gendian to 37607. And the question is, when you hear the word diversity, what comes to mind? And I'm going to see if this is stuck or not. Okay. So when you hear the word diversity, oh, that's nice. When you hear the word diversity, what comes to mind? What are some words, single words, that come to mind if you say, oh yeah, Dr. Gendian is going to talk about diversity? What is he going to talk about? What's the topic? Good. And you notice how this word cloud is forming, and things that get said more than one time get larger in size, which is a neat instrument. And you can use this kind of free polling software, right, in your classes, with groups that you speak with, because ideally, conversations are where learning takes place. If it's one way, right, sometimes the information doesn't sink in or get applied. And so how can we engage the people we're with? And we're seeing a beautiful montage of words that people have identified when they hear the word diversity. There's going to be 2 other opportunities for you to do this. And now that you're already signed in at that 37607, it'll be easier the second time. So this is great. I mean, look at the diversity and the various dimensions of that word that we're generating. Thank you. So I'm going to pull up now something that is called the diversity wheel, as the last few of you get your last couple of words up on that wall. It's called the diversity wheel. The diversity wheel was adapted from Marilyn Loden's 1996 work. The center of the wheel represents the primary dimensions, so you can see that in the darker shade of purple, the primary dimensions of diversity, and then in the outer, more lighter shade of purple, you see the secondary dimensions of diversity. The inner ones, you can think about, why might those ones be together, hanging in the middle? And maybe some ideas would come to your mind. Well, those tend to be the most impactful on our identities, affect our way of life, affect how we're perceived by others, because they tend to be quite visible. They tend to be things that we're born with, right? And if not able to change, at least not easy to change. And then the ones on the outer side are things that are acquired, things that can change over time. They influence our values, our beliefs, our behaviors, our experiences. And the intersections of these different dimensions of diversity really make us who we are. Each of us is a unique blend of the intersections of these various forms of diversity. I think it's important to recognize, to respect, to appreciate, and to value the diversity that we have here in the room tonight. And so I'm going to ask in a moment, I'm going to read out some categories within a few of these dimensions. And those of you who identify with those particular dimensions, feel free to stand if you identify with those particular categories. And those of you who are remaining seated, maybe you don't identify with that particular category, we're going to have you applaud and celebrate that diversity that is in the room. Okay? We're literally going to show our appreciation for diversity through our applause. You ready? Okay, I'm just going to pick 3 for the purposes of time, and I'm going to start with one on the outer rim. Languages spoken. And I did a list off the top of my head. I knew that I wasn't going to get all of the languages that are probably represented, but I hope I captured most, and I still have a slot for any other languages represented in the room that are not on the chart. So let's start first. If you speak Hmong, let's have those individuals stand. All right. If you speak Spanish, let's have those individuals stand. If you speak Italian, let's have those individuals stand. We will clap anyway. If you speak German, all right. If you speak Russian, a Native American language, all right, very good. Japanese, all right. Arabic, Kif halek. If you speak French, look at that. ASL, if you speak American Sign Language. All right, excellent. If you speak Armenian, let's have those individuals stand. All right, there are 3 right there. 4. If you speak Chinese, 2. All right, excellent. English. I expect a lot of people standing for this one. We will applaud for ourselves. If you speak Hindi, great. If you speak Tagalog, One. Good. If you speak Punjabi. Okay, any other languages that are represented in the room, not necessarily what other people speak, because that could be a very long list, that are other languages that are represented in the room. Let's shout those out. Urdu. Urdu. What else? All right, let's look at that. You are in a room tonight where there are at least, according to my count, I may have lost count, 12 different languages spoken. What an asset. What a richness of culture, not only in terms of we'd be able to travel anywhere we'd like and we'd get along and we'd get around pretty easily, but in terms of our worldviews, because language is more than just about communicating with another person. Language shapes our worldviews, and each culture that has its own unique language, right? That language is influenced and grown out of its environment and carries with it a set of values and a perspective that is really only found in that particular culture. And that's why it's such a thing to be proud of, to respect, admire, value, appreciate. We're going to pick race as well, even though it's a social construct, and we'll break that down a little bit later. I could have picked ethnicity and done a variety of ethnic categories, but these are pan-racial or pan-ethnic labels, and I realize that they encompass many different types of folks, and I want you to realize that too. When we say Middle Eastern, for example, that covers a whole range of folks from different cultures, with different languages, with different ethnic identities, different nation states, different religions, right? So it's important to understand that these labels, sometimes we can get confused and think that we know someone just by where they are on certain dimensions of diversity that we're looking at, but it's much richer than this level of detail. And so on this point, I just want to remind you, right, that we may need to check ourselves, right? Just because you now know what language a person may speak, what broad racial label they may stand for, I don't want you to leave this room tonight and say, I know that person. You don't know me. You only know a few dimensions about me. Don't judge me. Get to know me. Find out who I am. But you're going to be able to do that if you know who you are. And so that's why it starts with that self. And then it's about who am I, who are you, who are we. So let's ask anyone who identifies with personally or is identified by others as African, African American, or black. Let's have those individuals stand. Yeah. Middle Eastern, let's have those individuals stand. Hispanic or Latino, Latina. Very diverse category. Asian or Asian American. And you may find yourself standing for more than one category. That's totally okay because you may have multiple ethnic ancestries. You may have multiracial backgrounds. And so if you get applause twice, good for you. If you identify with or are identified by others as white, European, or Caucasian, let's have those individuals stand. Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, let's have those individuals stand. Yes, all right, very good. American Indian or Alaska Native. Very good, excellent. Good, thank you. And then some other race that may be represented that I didn't have a pull from the list on census categories. Anything to shout out? I was a little bit broader than the census category, so I tried to account for that. But again, what a richness of cultural tapestry that's in the room. And tapestry, right, that mosaic of threads that come from a variety of different backgrounds. My third and final category, and we're going to call out, yes, sorry, age. And this is one of those ones in the primary group, right? You didn't pick what year you were born, and there's nothing you can do about it after it's happened. You might try a variety of different things. Exercise could help, but still, you were born in the year you were born. And so if you are under 21, let's have those individuals stand. All right. And if you were between the ages of 21 and 29, let's have those individuals stand. All right. Look at that. Great. If you are between 30 and 39. All right. Great. 40 and 49. That's me. And 50 to 59. And 60 to 69. All right. All right. And 70 to 79. Okay. And 80 and over. All right. And this is such an important thing for this room and for our campus and for my classroom and for our community, because we can draw from so many different perspectives, a variety of experiences. And that is, again, something to be valued, something to be seen as a strength, not a weakness, but a strength. Something to recognize. We can't pretend that diversity does not exist. We can't look at, I was going to actually try to draw some figures on one of the slides or find some shapes. We can't look at a triangle and a square and a circle and say, Dr. Jendian, I really don't see shape. I just see geometric figures. Well, try that when you need a triangle or you need a square or you need a circle. It doesn't work. And you're just kidding yourself and everybody around you if you say, I don't recognize it. It's there. Difference, though, is not a problem. And that's where I think some people want to pretend not to see it, because they may associate difference with being a problem. Difference is not the problem. The problem is how we think about difference and how we use difference to differentiate whom we allow to do certain things and whom we say, no, you can't do that. Who gets certain rewards and access and who doesn't. So it's around the hierarchy of access, right? And we're using difference to give access. So difference isn't the problem. It's how we think about it, and it's how we act on it that creates the problem in our society. Now, there's research from Harvard, Stanford, Tufts. I could have done a whole nother lecture on the value of diversity to diverse teams generating more creative and innovative ideas, to diversity on work teams being more productive than teams that are not as diverse, to even in academia, diverse scholarly groups of researchers tends to improve the quality of scientific ideas. So there's a whole slew of literature about that we could talk about, but instead I'm going to rely on a more simple illustration of the value of diversity that I think will resonate very quickly in fewer words. So say you are going to be trapped on a desert island and you can take 4 or 5 people with you. Well, if I'm going to be trapped on a deserted island and I get to pick 4 or 5 people with me, I'm not going to pick 4 or 5 other sociologists. No offense to my 2 sociology colleagues in the room and others who may be watching. But don't get me wrong, we'll have great conversations. We're going to talk about a lot of different social issues, right? But we're probably never going to get off that island. So I'm thinking I'm going to take a construction management major. I'm going to take a nutrition major so we can survive and know what to eat and not to eat. I'm going to take a nursing major in case somebody gets hurt, right? We'll know what basically to do. I'm going to take, I think I'd take a geography major, right? So mapping and coordinates, they'll be able to tell those types of things. And I think I would bring along a psychology major, right? In case there's conflict that develops, they can mediate and resolve that for us, whether it be group therapy sessions or one-to-one. You see what I'm saying? Diversity is an asset to our teams, to our community, to our world, to our classroom. Now, despite that illustration, and amidst this diversity that we've got, both in this room, on our campus, in California, across our nation, and around the world, despite that, we still have this reminder from a 1955 speech by Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "Unity is the great need of the hour." He said this as part of the Montgomery bus boycott. Unity starts with an open heart and an open mind and an open attitude that allows us to see past our external visible differences, to recognize that we have much more in common than we do different. And in our society today, we have an empathy deficit. We have a widespread inability to put ourselves in other people's shoes. To develop empathy, which will lead to unity, we need to come together with others who are different from ourselves on a regular basis. We need to share our stories of our experiences. Unity and community starts with knowing who you are and where you come from, and being open to understanding that about others. We must recognize and learn from the struggles and join with others across the social boundaries to increase unity in community. And so we're reminded again, unity is the great need of the hour. Humans are actually more similar than we are different. We have more in common, both culturally and genetically, than we do different. Near every human society has different forms of roughly these 5 social institutions. Nearly every human culture has some form of a rice dish. There are nearly 40,000 varieties of rice, whether you like steamed white rice, rice pilaf, curried rice, Spanish rice, right? Variety. But a lot of cultures share that in common. And genetically speaking, humans have more in common than they do different. We think penguins should be more similar, but they're actually not. Any 2 penguins, genetically speaking, have twice the genetic variation from one to another than any 2 human beings from one to another. Fruit flies. This was the topic last week. Part of the presentation by my colleague, Dr. Joy Goto, talking about her research on fruit flies and what they have to say about neurodegenerative diseases. And fruit flies, genetically, one to another, 10 times the genetic difference from one fruit fly to another compared to one human being to another. Just so you know what that 10 times genetic difference means or is equivalent to, that would be the same as a human being to a chimpanzee. Very different. And so, I don't know if when you see this photo, why would you be surprised to learn that all 4 women are the same person? It's the same woman. It's right there. Andrea Circe. Part African American, part Native American. But what this slide does is it reminds us that although there may be external differences, what's underneath is actually quite the same. And that with enough good makeup and a good wig, right, you could potentially change your race or your appearance of your race to others. It's quite a stark view. So why is it that humans look so different on the outside, our phenotype, but are so similar on the inside, our genotype? Well, I'm going to do another quiz, so grab your mobile device. If you were present at last week's lecture, Fresno State Talks, you'll have an increased chance of getting this one correct. You didn't know there was going to be a test, did you? So again, if you're joining for the first time, Dr. Jendian to 37607, if you're already joined, you can just click in your answer. How long does it take for a fruit fly to develop from egg to adult? From egg to adult. 1 day, 5 days, 10 days, a month. It depends on the environment. So, the answer is either C or E. 10 days, or it depends on the environment. Because changing the environmental conditions could change that pattern. And so this actually helps to explain why fruit flies are so different. And the length, I was going to ask you another question, how long do fruit flies live? About 90 to 100 days. So their day is equivalent to our years in terms of longevity. And so they have a fast maturation. They've been around a lot longer than human beings have. They've had greater opportunity to develop that genetic variation. They don't tend to migrate like humans do because they don't live long enough to travel from one part of the globe to another part of the globe. They don't tend to mix then with various different fruit flies from different parts of the globe. So you can begin to understand why humans are among the most similar genetically of all living species on the planet. Our recency of a species. And so consequently, we can redefine the human family as one big extended family because it's a biological fact through the Human Genome Project that every human being on the planet is at least a 50th cousin of every other human being on the planet. And so now we have a whole different way of looking at another person, another human being, and seeing a version of ourselves in that other person. That's a big idea, a big thought. The first step of empathy is seeing ourselves in other people. Empathy is the key to understanding others. Empathy involves identifying with the pain and circumstances of another human being, viewing that person's situation from the perspective of that person. It's different from sympathy. So empathy involves, as Jane Elliott would say, walking a mile in another person's moccasins. Or recognize the other as human, just like me, who experiences joy and pain, happiness and sorrow. Something that must be cultivated, learned, and developed. We are not islands unto ourselves. That reference is to the first line of a poem that actually was part of a longer piece of prose from 1624 by English author John Donne. No person is an island entire of itself. Every person is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as a promontory were, as well if a manner of thine friends or of thine own were. Any person's death diminishes me, because I am involved in humanity. And therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. The bell tolls for thee. This reminder that no person is an island, and yet, despite the eloquence of that reminder, many of us are not hearing the bell that's tolling for us. And that's because of the empathy deficit in our society. Some research from the University of Michigan's Institute for Social Research has actually shown that college students today have less empathic concern for others than prior generations. This figure shows a decline of empathy in the United States, and the college students are not alone. That other studies have been done for the general population. College students today about 40% lower in empathy than their counterparts 20 or 30 years ago, as measured by the standard trends, right, of this personality test. And so why is that the case? Well, first, some of the questions. I sometimes try to understand my friends better by imagining how things look from their perspective. That's putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And college students are responding less frequently positively to that question. Or, I often have tender or concerned feelings for people less fortunate than I am. Why is this? There are several reasons. These are all hypothetical right now, as the research will be done to bear that out. And part of it is increased exposure to media, including violent video games, because we are hypothesized as desensitizing ourselves when we're inflicting pain on others through the video game. The rise in social media, where you can just turn off Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever social media you're using, and not attend to the problems that other people may be facing, because we're not encountering them face to face maybe as much as we were before those tools were available for us. Also, we can't deny an increased competitive atmosphere and inflated expectations and pressure for success that focus on me, what I need, rather than we. There are three ways to draw on experience to interpret or relate to others' oppression that Fagan et al. Talk about. One of those is borrowed approximations. This is where you just take what other people are telling you as their truth and don't judge them. Don't say, that's not been my experience. Or, I don't believe that. That just seems far-fetched. No, I'm telling you this actually happened. So borrowed approximations is where we're relying on the stories of others for what has happened, and not trying to impose our own narrative or experience on what they're telling us. Global approximations is where we just apply the principles of fairness and justice. And fairness is a fairly easy thing. Kindergartners recognize it right away. You see something on the playground, they know what's not fair. They'll be the first teacher, right? Not fair. They know. If you sense it, then it's probably not fair. Overlapping approximations is where we may not have had the exact same experience, but because we have a similar experience, there's some overlapping aspects to that loss, to that pain, to that suffering, to that injustice that we may be facing. So these are three of the ways that we can rely on them. And developing empathy, I mean, it doesn't happen by itself. We have to be conscious about that. We have to really focus and cultivate it It happens as we increase our knowledge of other people's experience. It happens as we increase our own understanding of our biases and prejudices and stereotypes that we learned. We set aside those stereotypes only when we become aware of them. That's when we gain power over them. Otherwise, they remain hidden biases, and they have more power over you than you realize because you don't even know they're operating. The development of a friendly interest in what's actually happening to others and believing them their stories when they're telling you. The capacity to see and feel some of the pain that others are experiencing in that oppression and injustice. The willingness to put ourselves into the situation, in the line of fire, where we might actually bear the brunt of hostility from others. That is part of this experience of empathy and cultivating empathy. The key to understanding others, right? A very famous quote from Henry David Thoreau. This actually leads us into a video where this quote is the lead answer. I would like you to pay special attention. I'm going to ask you after the video what words come to mind from seeing this. If you could stand in someone else's shoes, hear what they hear, see what they see, feel what they feel. Would you treat them differently? And so you have an opportunity to respond with any word or phrase or comment about that. It's extremely moving to me. You just don't realize where someone else is that you're encountering. In your classroom, driving down the street in the car in front of you or the car behind you. You don't know what they're dealing with. The person who's taking your order, who's serving your meal, who's cutting your hair, who's in your office for advising, you don't know all of the things that they're bringing into that situation. And many judgments are flashing through our minds. How are we treating the people who are around us? Are we giving them the benefit of the doubt? Are we trying to empathize even when we don't know what pain or joy they may be experiencing? Ultimately, it comes down to action. You've heard it said before that knowledge is power. I disagree with that. I think that knowledge is potential power. Knowledge becomes acted upon. When it becomes acted upon, that's when knowledge becomes powerful. And so it has to take that step. You could have all the knowledge in the world, but if you're not using it, if you're not applying it, if you're not taking something from this into your life and doing something with it, it's useless. It's all for naught. Where is the action? How do we translate this into differences? Dream big. Dream big. It's not going to be easy. Frederick Douglass reminds us, right? There is no victory without a struggle. Other people will tell you you can't make a difference. You're just one person. Of course it's not easy. Of course making that change or implementing the things you know may be difficult. But that's our choice to make, and each one of us can do that on a micro level, let alone getting connected to others and making a difference on a macro level, changing and influencing the policies around us that are affecting the lives of people. Gandhi encourages us to be the change that you want to see in the world by reaching out to those in need, by forming coalitions with those who are outside of our boundary lines. The things that we've been told who are different from us are actually more similar than we are. Don't focus only on the difference. Recognize it and appreciate it, but realize the similarity and the deeper commonalities that exist. If you really want to be a part, and if you really want to create what Dr. King called the beloved community, a beloved community where each cares for each other. A beloved community is one where he described as the solidarity of the human family, an eloquent phrase that captures a beautiful thing that only comes true with our actions. And finally, we bring it back full circle to Martin Luther King's quote that reveals his sociological training. He was a sociology major. His sociology training, that it all really boils down to this. All life is interrelated, and we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly. I am a descendant of genocide survivors. They were Armenian refugees from Syria who thankfully were accepted and admitted to this society, the United States of America. And although they did not have an easy path, they were met with prejudice, they were met with discrimination, they were unfairly treated. In the end, because of the actions of a critical mass of Americans, we have broadened the dream that made it possible for my parents to graduate from Fresno State, for me to get my PhD, and for me to do the work that I'm doing. This is what makes America great. It's up to us to carry it through for the people that come after us. It's said that you are planting the seeds for a tree under whose shade you may not sit. And that should be the motivational factor that drives us to the Helen Keller quote, that you may not be able to do everything, but that doesn't give you the excuse not to do the something that you can do. Don't forget, reaching across and acting on what you've learned, taking what you've learned at Fresno State and putting it into action is where it rests. And that's how we will, together, move forward and repair the world. Thank you.